They said Burkina Faso would crumble, that the moment French troops were expelled, the country would fall into chaos. Western analysts, military experts, news anchors, they all lined up to predict disaster. They claimed the Burkinabe army wasn't strong enough, not professional enough, not capable of holding the line against jihadist insurgents. But today, those same voices are silent. And maybe, just maybe, they should be ashamed. Because something extraordinary is happening. Schools, yes, schools, are reopening in areas that were once completely shut down due to terrorism. Towns that had been silenced by fear are hearing children's voices again. And this isn't coming from social media rumors or patriotic speeches. It's a fact confirmed by none other than the United Nations itself, UNICEF, to be specific. On June 19, 2025, Katherine Russells, the Executive Director of UNICEF, made an official visit to Burkina Faso. She didn't just land for a photo op. She sat down with the country's Prime Minister, Rimtalba Jean Emmanuel Ouédraogo. Their conversation focused on something that rarely makes international headlines: children, education, health, protection. And then, during that meeting, Katherine Russells said something that should have been front-page news around the world. She congratulated the Burkinabe government for the reopening of schools that had been closed due to insecurity. A simple statement, yet it shattered months, if not years, of Western skepticism and media silence. The question is, how is President Traore pulling this off? How has a young military leader, demonized by much of the international press, managed to bring back peace to regions once ruled by fear? More importantly, why isn't this being talked about? Why isn't this transformation celebrated in the same outlets that once predicted Burkina Faso's collapse? The truth is uncomfortable for some, because what we're witnessing is the return of sovereignty, not the kind that comes with big speeches, but the kind that rebuilds classrooms, that brings back teachers, that lets children carry backpacks instead of trauma. And it's happening without Western troops, without foreign military bases, without aid conditions and puppet strings. Traore's approach has been firm, independent, and unapologetically African. And while some world powers may not be thrilled by that, the people on the ground, the ones who matter, are beginning to see results. Schools are reopening. Hope is returning. So yes, the same media that screamed failure has nothing to say now. But silence can be louder than words. And in that silence, a new chapter for Burkina Faso is being written, one that no foreign analyst saw coming. This wasn't a political promise. It wasn't a dream or a hopeful projection. It was a statement of fact. Schools that were once shut down by violence and fear are now open again, and not just symbolically. Actual classrooms, real teachers, children learning in peace. Let's be clear, the government would never risk reopening schools in areas still under threat. That alone tells you one thing: those regions are now under control. The tide has turned. When the Prime Minister met with UNICEF's Executive Director, he didn't just list talking points. He reminded her of what's actually happening on the ground. National programs, despite the ongoing security crisis, are being rolled out to protect and nurture the next generation. And the commitment isn't stopping here. Burkina Faso's government is doubling down, reopening more schools, investing more in children's futures. And here's the proof. Since January 2025, schools have been reopening across the country. Villages like Kalabo, Zelase, and Tandu, once cut off by jihadist terror, are now ringing with the sound of education once again. It wasn't magic. It wasn't foreign aid. It was the determination of Burkinabe forces, specifically the brave elements of GUMI-10. These soldiers didn't just liberate towns. They cleared the way for an entire generation to reclaim their right to learn. Their work allowed teachers to return. And on February 17, 2025, classrooms in those villages reopened, lessons resumed, futures were put back on track. What once seemed lost has been recovered, one classroom at a time. This is the kind of transformation that deserves to be broadcast across the world. But instead, it's buried, ignored, erased. And that's exactly why we're telling it here. Because something remarkable is happening in Burkina Faso, and no one can take that away. But reopening schools wasn't the end of the story. In some places, The Traore administration went even further, launching full renovations to restore dignity to the learning environment. One striking example lies in the municipality of Penny, tucked in the Haute-Bassin region of Burkina Faso. In April 2024, President Ibrahim Traore made an unannounced visit to several schools in Penny. No cameras, no staged welcome, just a quiet, purposeful stop that would leave a lasting impact. There, he sat with children, listened to their teachers, and took in the reality firsthand. He didn't arrive with a speech, he arrived with intent. Right there, he made a promise. The schools would be renovated, teaching materials would be provided, conditions would change. Not someday, but soon. To many, it may have sounded like a typical presidential vow, the kind people are used to hearing and forgetting. But this time, something different happened. A year later, that promise became reality. The school buildings in Penny have been transformed, clean, vibrant, ready for the future. And this wasn't just hearsay. It was confirmed by Captain Martha Celeste Anderson, the president's chief of staff. On his return from launching a medical project in Ouédraogo, he stopped by Penny. What he saw left no doubt. Traore had delivered. In a country rising from hardship, this wasn't just construction. It was healing. It was hope, built brick by brick, classroom by classroom. And it all began with one quiet, unannounced visit. Captain Martha Celeste Anderson didn't just confirm the transformation, he expressed deep pride. Standing before the newly renovated school, he reflected on how far things had come in less than a year. This wasn't just a fresh coat of paint, it was a promise fulfilled, a symbol of commitment turned into reality. Indeed, it was President Ibrahim Traore who, during his quiet visit, pledged to improve the learning environment for these children. And now, the results speak for themselves. The schools in Penny have not only been renovated, they've also been fenced for added security. No longer exposed or neglected, these buildings now reflect the value of the children inside them. "We want the infrastructure to be modern," said Captain Anderson, "to guarantee better education for students and allow the teaching staff to better transmit their knowledge." But his message didn't end with facilities. He turned to the teachers, those standing on the front lines of Burkina Faso's future, and offered encouragement. He reminded them of their role not just as educators, but as shapers of character. He asked them to pass down the values that define Burkinabe society: resilience, integrity, responsibility. And to the students, his message was clear and heartfelt. Success is within reach, but it must be earned. He urged them to work hard, to persevere, and above all, to carry the torch of unity, solidarity, and respect for their elders. Because in today's Burkina Faso, education is more than a tool, it's a mission, a foundation for building a new nation from the classroom up. Clearly, these remarkable developments in Burkina Faso's education sector aren't just random progress. They're the direct result of President Traore's firm, relentless campaign against insecurity. And as anyone can see, the results speak for themselves. Reports confirm that nearly 70% of the territory once controlled by terrorist groups has now been reclaimed. More than 1 million displaced citizens have returned to their homes. That's not just a statistic, it's a national recovery in motion. Yet, despite all this, there are still skeptics. Some say the numbers are exaggerated, that the Burkinabe military is still overwhelmed, that these stories of progress are political theater. But if that's the case, how do they explain what's happening on the ground? The truth is visible. The reopening of schools, especially in formerly abandoned villages, is living proof that security has improved. You can't fake the return of teachers. You can't stage the laughter of children back in classrooms once silenced by gunfire. That kind of progress can't be faked. It must be earned. So let's ask the hard question. When French troops were still stationed in Burkina Faso, what did they actually accomplish? Under their watch, terrorism didn't shrink, it spread. What began in Mali metastasized into Burkina Faso, spilling across the Sahel like wildfire. It was during their presence that countless citizens were forced from their homes, schools were shuttered, and farmlands were destroyed. It was during their so-called partnership that Burkina Faso descended into chaos. And now, after they've been removed. The narrative being pushed by some Western voices is that their absence will lead to disaster? How does that make sense? The facts on the ground say otherwise. Schools are reopening. Communities are rebuilding. Security is returning. And for once, it's being done by Burkinabe hands, for Burkinabe people. This isn't just a shift in tactics. It's a shift in sovereignty. The most tragic part of this entire story is what the Burkinabe military had to endure under French presence. Despite years of supposed support, the soldiers of Burkina Faso remained ill-equipped, underprepared, and overwhelmed. France claimed it was training them, claimed it was waving assistance, but behind the scenes, the reality was humiliating. In some cases, Burkinabe troops were reportedly trained with wooden replicas instead of real weapons, toy guns for a real war. And it didn't stop there. France actively blocked Burkina Faso from acquiring effective weapons. The situation became so dire that the country had to borrow arms from neighboring nations just to defend its people. In every sense, France's military presence didn't solve the crisis. It deepened it. It created dependency, not security, frustration, not freedom. But that dynamic changed the moment President Ibrahim Traore made the bold decision to kick them out. From that point forward, a new chapter began. Traore wasted no time. He focused intensely on rebuilding and modernizing the military. He didn't just boost numbers, he changed the very core of the defense force. Training was reorganized, equipment was upgraded, and perhaps most importantly, Burkina Faso started forging new military partnerships, this time with African allies and non-Western powers. These weren't symbolic alliances. They were strategic, practical, purposeful, and at the heart of this transformation was one major investment: the acquisition of real, high-grade military weapons. For the first time in years, the Burkinabe army wasn't relying on hand-me-downs or wooden models. They had the tools and the leadership to fight back. What Traore did wasn't just military reform, it was a reclaiming of dignity, a refusal to remain a pawn in someone else's game. Throughout 2024, President Traore made one thing unmistakably clear: Burkina Faso was done begging for security, and he put his money where his mission was, by heavily investing in high-grade military hardware. But unlike previous administrations, Traore didn't look west. He looked east and south and across Africa. His eyes were on real allies, not gatekeepers. In January 2024, Traore finalized a major weapons deal with China. It wasn't symbolic. It was strategic. This wasn't about photo ops. It was about firepower. The deal included a powerful mix of armored vehicles, advanced self-propelled mortars, and large stockpiles of weapons and ammunition. Tools not for parade grounds, but for frontline battles against insurgents. According to official reports, this delivery was part of a broader military modernization plan designed to reinforce the nation's security forces. A plan that Traore wasn't just directing from a distance, he was leading from the front. At the handover ceremony, he personally inspected the new weapons. Among them, 6 WMA-301 fire support vehicles, built by China's Norinco Defense Company. Traore walked around them slowly, eyes focused, hands behind his back. He knew what this moment meant. For the army, for the country. Next, he examined 8 CS/SM-1 self-propelled mortars. Mounted on Dongfeng light tactical vehicles, these 81mm mortars brought a new kind of precision and mobility to the Burkinabe forces. And here's the detail that stunned even defense analysts. This was the first time such weapons had ever been deployed on African soil. Burkina Faso wasn't just buying gear, it was rewriting its military future. After personally inspecting the newly acquired weapons, President Traore did something symbolic. He didn't keep the spotlight on himself. He handed the equipment over to the Ministry of Defense and Veterans Affairs. And in that moment, he said something that would echo far beyond the parade ground. He declared that the acquisition of these weapons was the direct result of disciplined, transparent resource management. And then he said the words that sent a clear message to the world. This proves that Burkina Faso is capable of waging war. This wasn't just about firepower, it was about sovereignty, about proving that a country, once starved of equipment and strategy, could now stand on its own. Even more powerful was what came next. Traore made it clear that this achievement wasn't funded by foreign aid or outside pressure. It was made possible by the sacrifices and contributions of Burkinabe citizens. Every tank, every mortar, every round of ammunition, paid for by the people, for the people. And this wasn't a one-time gesture. Traore has been consistent in strengthening the country's defenses. Back in March 2023, he secured another massive delivery of military hardware, this time worth around $415 million. The purchase included a range of battlefield essentials, drones, armored vehicles, combat gear, and more. The exact supplier wasn't disclosed, but a trusted source within the army confirmed the arsenal was real and already operational. Drones, fighter jets, transport vehicles, ammunition, all of it now in use by Burkinabe forces. And by all accounts, the equipment has performed efficiently, giving the army not only firepower, but confidence. What we're witnessing isn't just military reform. It's a complete reversal of dependency, a shift in national identity, from vulnerable to capable, from occupied to in control. Today, the Burkinabe military is no longer a struggling, under-equipped force. It is rapidly transforming into a capable and confident army, one that not only defends, but wins. Thanks to President Traore's reforms, the military now has the tools, the training, and the leadership needed to take the fight directly to the terrorists, and the results are already showing. In just the first 2 weeks of January 2025, Burkina Faso's combat forces recorded a string of victories that would have been unthinkable just 2 years ago. A coordinated wave of operations, combining precise airstrikes with decisive ground offensives, led to the elimination of dozens of terrorists, the recovery of advanced weapons, and the consolidation of key strategic positions across the country. According to credible security sources, the momentum began on January 7th. That day, the Bani combat forces launched a direct assault on a criminal outpost. It wasn't just a hit-and-run mission. They neutralized multiple terrorists, captured a suspect, and seized military-grade equipment. The next day, the battlefield expanded. In the north-central region, intelligence flagged suspicious movements near Bulsa. Air Command responded swiftly. Targeted strikes hit enemy positions in Zegadegan, wiping out a criminal cell before it could strike. Then came January 8th. In the town of Goron, the elite BIR-23 unit encountered a hostile group during a reconnaissance patrol. What followed was a tactical engagement that left the enemy reeling. Terrorists were eliminated and critical logistics were recovered. The campaign didn't slow down. On January 9th, terrorists attempted a raid in Minay, but this time, Burkina Faso was ready. Coordinated air and ground operations repelled the attack. Missiles found their targets. Ground troops swept through, clearing the area and reclaiming control. These weren't isolated skirmishes. They were calculated victories, proof that the tide of insecurity is beginning to turn, and that Burkina Faso's army is not just surviving, it's winning. From January 10th to January 18th, Burkina Faso's combat forces intensified their campaign, moving with speed, precision, and growing confidence. On January 10th, the Leopard unit struck first, thwarting a terrorist attack in Wenbougou. They not only neutralized the threat, but recovered a cache of weapons and combat gear. The very next day, January 11th, BYR-19 came under attack north of Bogande. But instead of retreating, they held the line. The unit defeated the attackers and seized their equipment, flipping the narrative from defense to dominance. By January 12th, a joint detachment in the Central East region launched an ambush near Ouédraogo. It was a textbook execution. Terrorists were eliminated on the spot. Then came a critical moment on January 15th. Special forces intercepted armed groups near Pobe Mengao, deep in a volatile zone. That same day, coordinated airstrikes lit up the three-border region. The result, multiple terrorists eliminated and key supply routes disrupted. The next 48 hours would prove equally decisive. On January 16th and 17th, in the towns of Aurima and Dar es Salaam, the 18th Solenzo Rapid Response Battalion launched aggressive raids. They destroyed terrorist bases, recovered vital food and ammunition, and neutralized more enemy fighters. And while the frontline units held ground, the 10th BIR was conducting deep reconnaissance missions in Warakui, Kodougou, and Bagala. They pushed further, securing riverbanks and eliminating hostile elements hiding in remote zones. Between January 16th and 18th, Special Forces commandos launched a high-stakes offensive in the north-central region. The battles were fierce. But once again, Burkina Faso emerged victorious. Terrorist strongholds were dismantled, war materials recovered, and strategic zones reclaimed. And remember, this was all just in January. Then came the breaking news. Burkinabe intelligence confirmed a staggering victory. Over 1,000 terrorists eliminated in a massive operation. A success made possible by the newly acquired high-tech drones and sophisticated weaponry purchased from Russia, China, and Turkey. For the first time in years, Burkina Faso had the tools to strike fast, strike hard, and take back its territory. And yet, the Western media remains silent, or worse, critical. While these victories unfold, many international headlines still paint Traore as reckless. They downplay the progress. They ignore the numbers. They pretend the country is spiraling when, in fact, it's rising. But the people on the ground know the truth. The soldiers know the truth. And now, so do we. Western media continues to publish false reports accusing President Traore and the Burkinabe military of committing atrocities, including genocide and killing civilians. These narratives aim to discredit the military leadership and stir unrest among citizens, creating pressure to restore Western influence in Burkina Faso and the broader Sahel region. In response, President Traore suspended international outlets like Voice of America, and citizens protested outside the U.S. Embassy in Ouagadougou after Human Rights Watch accused the army of massacring 223 civilians. Protesters demanded the West stop spreading misinformation and questioned why human rights organizations were silent when terrorists were killing civilians. Despite growing military success and regained sovereignty, the West portrays the situation negatively to undermine the AES alliance and justify foreign intervention. The video urges Africans to distrust Western narratives, believe in their leaders, and stand firm in building a sovereign, united Africa.